Hello, everybody, and good morning. My name is Jack. I'm our lead author support specialist here at BookFunnel. And I'm going to take you through today's webinar. I'm kind of excited for this one, as it's something I've been working on for a while. Uh, and I really wanted to take the chance to simplify self-publishing in one of our webinars for those who have maybe lots of questions, although I realize I can't answer all the questions uh, that everybody's going to have. But I want to kind of take a step back and do more of a big picture webinar is the idea. And that's kind of what this is intended to be. So a lot of our webinars focus on something very specific. So we've done webinars on like direct sales, on ARC team, on like hosting your own promos on BookFunnel, some very specific things. And while that's great, and we're going to continue to do that, of course, I sometimes feel the need to take a step back and talk to folks about more of the basics, more of the foundational stuff. So some of this may or may not apply to you individually. You may be in a place in your self-publishing career where you've got all this stuff perfected, and all the stuff we're going to talk about today you already know about, and you're going to be listening to me the whole time and just be nodding along, and you're like, oh yeah, I've got a handle on that already. But for the rest of us mortals, I think that this should be helpful, at least in the way that we're going to be breaking it down, because I want to break down self-publishing and simplify it, because everything that you do when it comes to self-publishing kind of fits into one of five different boxes. Those are boxes I've arbitrarily kind of created. Somebody else might come along and have a different interpretation or do it their own way, totally fine. But I wanted to break it down so that for those of you who are new to self-publishing, or you, and I would say new to self-publishing is something like maybe you haven't even published yet. You're in those early stages where you're working on your first draft, or maybe you have only a couple books out there. There's a wide range there already. But you've published maybe a few books, right? Somewhere in that range where I think this might be the most helpful. But even beyond that, for those authors who have published several books and are trying to make that transition to earn some income from their books and that sort of thing, a lot of this is going to be geared toward that as well, I should say. If you are an author who's publishing, self-publishing for pleasure, just for the fun of it, totally fine. I think some of this will be helpful to you too, but this is really geared towards the author who wants to make income from self-publishing. And it's geared toward that idea and that mindset, and somebody who's looking to come at it and attack it in that sort of disciplined way. So that is the gist of what we're going to get to today, and I've tried to break it down for you. So quickly here, to kind of do a quick overview. So we're going to talk again, like I said, about simplifying self-publishing. We're going to talk about things like your writing habits, editing, which is everybody's favorite, some of the steps to publishing that you need to be aware of, social proof, marketing your book. And I have some resources here at the end, whether it's tools for specific aspects of self-publishing, or even some resources. We have some books that I'm going to be listing, and some coaching programs that we're familiar with. Definitely not an exhaustive list, but a few things that might be helpful to folks. But I want to start off with some statistics. So you have chosen to become an indie author or a self-published author. I remember when I myself started down the self-publishing, my self-publishing journey. This would have been in the early 2010s. Myself, this is also shortly before my fateful meeting with Damon Courtney, the founder of BookFunnel. It all kind of coincided there. But even at that time, and this is not that long ago, we're talking about 10, 15 years ago, the attitude around self-publishing back then was different. And the data has changed. A lot of people predicted this sort of thing back in the day and were laughed at, but a lot of this data, I think, vindicates a lot of the voices around that time, early on in kind of the self-publishing wave. Around that time, that this is the direction that publishing is going. So 53%. Self-published authors have seen a 53% increase in earnings in recent years. I believe 2022 is the date there, since 2022, and this is outpacing traditionally published authors. In fact, the median income for self-published authors is higher than the median income for most traditionally published authors as well. Now, there are traditionally published authors out there, of course, making buckets of money, just like there are self-published authors making buckets of money. But generally speaking, right, you'll have probably an easier time if you're looking to make an income from your writing going the self-publishing route, right? And that's increasing. The percentage of self-published authors who are selling direct is also increasing, and this is a great indicator. So this has been increasing in recent years. It's now at 27%, because this is the next step for indie authors and self-published authors, is to start selling direct. Back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, it was just to be taken seriously, right? Obviously, there were a lot of changes that happened that made self-publishing viable in that time. But now we're talking, this is kind of a second or third order change to self-publishing, where selling direct is going to become more and more the norm. This percentage increasing 10 or 15 years ago, if you polled authors and asked them what percentage of them were selling direct, I imagine it would be single digits. I don't know. I don't have that exact data, but I'm guessing it was very small. I'm guessing it was very small. That has changed. That has changed, and it is going to continue to increase. And why this matters to you as a self-published author is that the more authors who are selling direct, the more readers there will be buying from those authors, the more readers there will be who are comfortable buying direct from authors. It will become more the norm, which is good for authors. It's great for authors to be able to sell direct. And so the more that this becomes the norm, the better it is for everyone. So that should be encouraging, even if you don't have plans right now to sell direct yourself. It just means that, hey, there are more authors out there doing it, and they're having more success with it. That indicates that there's kind of a change in tone, really, around self-publishing. Self-published books accounted for 50% of Kindle's top 400 books in 2023. So that should tell you, right, that there's opportunity here. So whoever it is who's been discouraging you, uh, directly or indirectly, you have permission to ignore them now. For me, that's one of my aunts, and I love you, Aunt Jan, by the way, but and I'm being tongue in cheek, but I remember talking to family members early on in my self-publishing journey, lots of doubts. And this was a while ago, of course, so things might have changed, but lots of doubts, being put into my head about it. And really, this is, I could see this even back then. This is the way things were going. But hopefully you can take these statistics, and this isn't all the statistics that are out there, but hopefully these are encouraging to you. The income of self-published authors is increasing. The self-published books are being read by readers, and more authors are choosing to sell direct. So if you're wanting to move into the space and you're wanting to make income from being an indie author, a self-published author, the opportunity is there, right? I'm not saying results are guaranteed. I would never guarantee results, but the opportunity is there. And that goes a long way. By the way, I should mention here, before we get too far along, if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the Zoom chat. as well. Emma is here with me today. I think Kelly might be here as well. I'm not sure if she had trouble getting into the Zoom call early on, but she might be in there as well in the chat. And they'll be able to answer some of your questions, but also mark your questions for the Q&A at the end. If they mark your question with a star, it just means that we're going to be addressing that in the Q&A portion. All right, so let's simplify self-publishing. I want to break self-publishing down for you into 5 tasks. There are 5 things you have to do as a self-published author. And okay, it's not literally 5 things. Each one of those individual tasks could be broken down, and there's other things, but 5 categories of things. And when I started thinking this way, I think it helped me because I realized, okay, what are the most important things I need to be doing? What matters the most? What's actually going to make me successful as a self-published author? And which one of these tasks or categories am I neglecting or overlooking or just kind of going through the motions? I'm prioritizing some of these other things and ignoring the rest. So number 1 here, and I've got a graphic and some notes here too, so it'll all make sense here in a moment. So task number 1, got to write. Right? If you're an author, you've got to write. So this includes everything from the conceptualizing, planning stage, doing any research that's necessary, right? Planning and outlining, and then producing your first draft. I put all of those into that phase, because really they're all necessary for each other, right? If you're writing fiction, outlining is big, conceptualizing, coming up with ideas. And then, of course, you've got to write that first draft. You've got to actually get to that point where you've written the first draft. The biggest pain point, I've repeated this multiple times and I'm going to continue to repeat it. The biggest pain point for readers is running out of stuff to read. And so readers are attracted to authors who are actively writing, producing new work. And so for that reason, you should be an author who is actively writing all the time. Now, this will look different depending on your genre, depending on how aggressive your release strategy is. So I don't want you to think like there's some sort of standard that you have to meet here. You might have goals that you want to meet, but it's going to be different for everybody. For example, let's compare nonfiction and fiction. If you're writing nonfiction, my guess is you're going to spend more time doing research and planning and maybe doing the conceptualization than the actual writing itself. The actual writing itself might not take as much time for you if you're in nonfiction. I could see some cases where that might be the case. It could be completely the opposite too in certain forms of nonfiction, but you can tell there's a difference there between fiction and nonfiction, right? If you're writing children's books, for example, right? The word count on some children's books isn't all that high, so it's not really about word count like it might be if you're writing novels. And so take this and kind of interpret it through your own lens, right? But the first task, and there's a reason why this is task number 1, you got to write. You have to be writing if you're going to have success as a self-published author, right? What that looks like for you. Again, how aggressive you want to be. Are you doing a rapid release strategy and do you need to release something new every month or every couple of weeks? Well, then you're going to be doing lots of writing, is my guess. Right? If you have more time in between releases, maybe you don't have to be writing as much or as fast or at the same pace. Right? But nonetheless, this is the foundation of being a self-published author. And I think it can get lost when we're looking at all the other things. We're talking about Facebook ads and marketing and building your mailing list and doing promos and book covers and blurbs, and you can lose sight of what really is at the core of all this, which is writing. Task number 2, editing, right? Everybody loves editing. Editing, I consider a separate task from writing. Because I love writing personally, and editing makes me want to rip my hair out. They're 2 totally different things. So in my mind, I categorize them differently. But I think this is also because we want to keep them separate because we want to give each one its own effort, right? We don't want to write the book and then kind of have the editing as an afterthought. Effort needs to be put into editing, whether that is through self-editing or you're hiring that out, right? Again, either way, it's costing you time or it's costing you money, right? And so you don't want to overlook this step of the process, right? So after you have your first draft, copy editing. So we're looking at the any grammar, spelling mistakes, all of that stuff, right? For those who don't know what copy editing is, literary editing or developmental editing is more looking at the story structure and that sort of thing. If you are relatively new to publishing, I do recommend that you get involved with some kind of developmental editor or some sort of literary editor if you can. It's not always cheap, but it is worth it. I know my editor, uh, who I'll give a shout out to, Harry DeWolf, um, uh, really steered me in my writing career early on in the right direction, and it was very helpful. A lot of the advice that he gave me at that stage. So if you find a good literary or developmental editor, and you're just getting started out, it's worth the investment at that time. It really is worth the investment. I know for some folks, I'm also going to be mentioning some budget friendly, right, alternatives here for folks who might not be in the position to drop a few hundred or over $1,000 on an editor for each book that you release. No judgment here. There are ways to kind of do the self-editing strategy on a budget as well. Beta readers should also not be forgotten. They're kind of part of this process too, getting the book ready for release. This is feedback for you. You're getting feedback from your editors, whether they're copy editors, literary editors, or you're getting feedback from your beta readers and then incorporating that. And either way, even if you hire that out, I do want to mention this, even if you hire this work out to other editors, you still have to go in and make those changes yourself. So you will have to work on the manuscript at this stage one way or the other. All right, so it's an important task. Task number 3, this is publishing, which kind of might sound like, well, duh, you're going to publish the book. But what do I mean? What are these publishing related tasks? It's everything to do with putting your books out there. So what sales channels are you going to use? What formats are you going to be selling in? Picking a good cover, finding an artist, right, who might be making your cover versus, designing a cover yourself. And of course, writing blurbs and book descriptions and taglines. Everything that the customer, the reader, is going to see when they show up to, say Amazon and they're visiting your book's page, right? All of the work that goes into that. Are you going to be wide or are you going to be on KU? Are you going to have your books available in ebook and paperback? Are you also going to do audiobooks? These are publishing decisions that you have to make that are going to make your book marketable and attractive to readers, but they are separate tasks from actually writing the book and editing the book, and then some of the other things that we're going to be talking about later. These are some of the most exciting things, but you might not be doing these tasks very often, even if you're releasing rapidly, right? And let's say you're releasing a book once a month, you'll be, hitting publish once a month, right? You'll probably have already made a choice as to where you're going to be publishing your books. So that's a choice you make early on. You probably have a pricing strategy that you've already established, and you're going to stick with that. The formats for your books, right? There's obviously some things that go into that. If you're going to be offering just ebooks for now, and maybe later on you'll deal with the print books and the audiobooks. It's totally fair, totally a way to do it. But if you're going to be doing those other formats, there's steps and processes to that. So all that in my book anyway falls under the task of publishing. And so those publishing tasks, while they might not come up all that often, they are crucial to making your book attractive to readers. Number 4, social proof. Social proof. This is getting people to read your book and tell other people that they liked it, otherwise known as reviews. These are reviews. It should come as no surprise that we're mentioning reviews here. And yes, I have it as its own task because it is that important. We'll go into more detail later. Again, you might interpret all of this differently, but there's a reason why authors build ARC teams and review teams and all of that. And we have at BookFunnel, we have dedicated features for that because it plays such an important role into making your books marketable. I think it's distinct from publishing, uh, although a lot of those things might coincide. Your book gets released and you want to have those reviews line up, fair enough. But, you know, if I merge that with another one, then it might make it seem less important. So I gave it its own. But you can interpret these tasks, these 5 tasks, however you want, right? And task number 5, this is marketing your book. So you've got the book, it's out there, it's published, you've got reviews for it, and now you need to get it in front of more readers through advertising, promotion of any kind, and audience building. So that's where really there's a lot of work to be done in marketing. You could spend all of your time marketing your book, and in some cases you might, right? Again, we talked earlier about the differences between fiction and nonfiction. If you write a nonfiction book that's going to help a lot of people, you might spend the majority of your time on the marketing phase. Whereas if you're writing fiction, you're probably going to spend a lot more of your time on writing and editing because you need to come out with that next book. So you have 2 different audiences, you're fulfilling 2 different needs, right? Depending on what genre you're in and so forth, right? But marketing, right? You can get lost in marketing really. And I think a lot of authors maybe engage with this one the most because it feels like it's getting some more immediate results, right? You start a Facebook ad and you're going to start to see some results from that. Or you put your book into a group promo or you do a swap with an author. You're going to see some immediate results from that, which is true, of course. But you don't want to put the cart before the horse. And you don't want to focus so much on marketing that you forget to do all the other things that you need to do in order to be a well-rounded and successful self-published author, right? Again, interpret these 5 tasks however you want. If this doesn't make sense to you exactly, you're like, well, I kind of see it a different way. That's fine. I hope you understand, though, the point I'm trying to get across here is that you need to focus on these 5 things in order to have success. If you leave one of these out or you neglect it, it's going to harm your career in one way or another. So let's go through each one of these here. So it all starts with solid writing habits. You need to, first of all, understand the demands of writing, though. This is something that I encounter myself all the time, or frequently enough, that I made it first here. Writing, like any creative process, is going to take effort. It is going to take something out of you. You need to understand that it won't always be easy. You will get burnt out. You will encounter writer's block, any number of things. There are going to be challenges that you're going to face. That's right. So when you go into this and you're like, okay, I'm going to establish a writing habit of some kind, account for the fact that this process is going to come at a cost. It's like exercise. It's just like exercise. You might think, all right, I myself have been guilty of this before as well. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to go to the gym 6 or 7 days a week, work out really hard, right? That sort of thing. But you go there once and the next day you're sore, right? Your body has to adapt. Much the same way with writing. Your mind, your willpower, all of that, it has to adapt to the demands you're putting on it. Just be prepared that it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult at certain points. It's not always going to be easy, and that's normal. Right? Start with goals as well. You want to have writing goals in mind. This might be lined up with what your publishing strategy is if you're planning to release on a certain schedule. But set goals that work for you based on how much time you have and other demands you have. I'm not going to assume that everybody here is a full-time writer. If you're a full-time writer, I think this should be easy for you, right? But if you are not, you have a full-time job, you have a family, other responsibilities, this, that, or the other. Work writing into that where you can. Right. Then start with a plan. Before you start writing, you need to do any of your required research, establish an outline. Again, if you're in fiction or nonfiction, this is going to look different, probably. Again, nonfiction authors, you might spend more time in this phase, but a lot of writer's block, whether fiction or nonfiction related, stems from not knowing what's going to come next. I know I'm going to offend some of the pantsers in the room. For those of you who aren't familiar, right, the pantser and the plotter, right, the plotter plots everything out ahead of time, so they know before they write their book, and then the pantser just dives into writing, and they're writing by the seat of their pants, right? That's where that comes from. There's other phrases out there too, or analogies that are used to describe this same sort of thing, this sort of duality. Uh, I highly recommend, as somebody who was a longtime pantser, I highly recommend that you do outline, at least a bare bones outline, so you know what's coming next. Writer's block is avoidable. It's preventable, really, is the way I like to look at it. It's preventable in a lot of cases. Not always. It'll inevitably come up, but it is preventable. When you, and I know in my own personal experience, when I've had a really good writing habit and then I stall out and I miss a day of writing and then I miss a week and then I miss a month, it's because I didn't know what was coming next and I didn't spend enough time planning what I was going to be writing before I actually wrote it. Right? That's an essential part to your writing, is planning. Get your butt in the chair. At the end of the day, you got to get your butt in the chair and you got to write. You have to take the time to do it. Right? You have to employ any and all methods that get you into the writing chair, whatever that might look like. You need to bribe yourself. You need to hold yourself accountable. Or one of my favorites, which is goal stacking. I don't know if anybody else calls it this, but that's how I refer to it as, where I'm accomplishing two things at once. And so for me, what that looks like, and this might sound odd to some folks, I like to get my daily steps in as part of my fitness journey as well. And so I have goals in that regard. And so what I do is I actually write on my cell phone, right, while I'm on a walk. So I'll go for a walk and I'll be writing on my phone. I switched to actually writing on walking on a treadmill for obvious safety reasons, but occasionally I'll still go for a walk because I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm able to walk and write at the same time. And so I'm more motivated to spend time writing, right? I'm accomplishing two goals at once. It doesn't feel like I'm sacrificing one for the other. Personally, for me, that's a way of getting my butt in the chair, so to speak, right? Or carving out that writing time. And something like that might work for you as well, whether it's that specific example or something else. If there's anything else you can do while you're writing, which I know that's a very short list of things you can do at the same time, then that's one way to do it. Another thing might be to do some of your, maybe not your writing per se, but maybe some of your outlining or planning using dictation. If you have to spend a lot of time, driving, right? You can do that through dictation while you're driving, for example, or while you're otherwise occupied, washing dishes, something like that. Right? If you're the type of person who talks out loud to yourself a lot, that might be an option for you. So that just as another example. And yes, everybody loves editing. So a couple notes here on that as well. Editing, like I said, is always going to come at a cost. I think I mentioned this earlier. You can pay that cost in time or money. I am not going to assume that everybody here is paying for an editor for each book that they publish. You might be. However, you might not be in that position yet. No judgment, right? If you're not in the position to hire an editor for every book that you're publishing and you're just kind of wanting to get some stuff out there, get off the ground, get your publishing journey started, I will not judge you for that, for doing some self-editing and choosing that option if you're not ready for that yet, right? However, I think that should be the goal for most authors. Most all authors is to get to the point where that's something you can incorporate. It's obviously going to be ideal to have somebody else's input, but I understand not everybody is in that position depending on where you're at. So self-editing is an option if you are on a budget, but just understand that's going to cost you time, right? Instead of money. It will cost you time in terms of hours to go back and edit your manuscript. And it will probably, if you're really going to use some of the best tools out there for self-editing, it is going to cost you a little bit of money. In fact, I'll mention those here. Grammarly is great for copy editing, at least for an initial pass. It's not going to catch everything. There's some additional tools. I think a lot of self-editing authors use multiple tools when self-editing, and will use like spell check in multiple applications because for whatever reason, different spell check and different grammar checking applications will find different things. But it's at least a great place to start. And at a bare minimum, it's going to make sure that your manuscript is clean. There's also and there's a typo in here, autocrat. I think it was an autocorrect here. Autocrit is the name of the software. I think it was trying to change that to a word there, but autocrit, CRIT, and Pro Writing Aid. Those are two services out there that some authors will use. Whether I know some authors that don't even rely primarily on self-editing will use those as well to kind of analyze their books from a bit more of a developmental angle. I wouldn't quite say literary, because that really does require a human to do that, but it's a bit more of a developmental kind of angle. And your book gets, in most cases, compared to other books within the same genre. There are some things, having tested out, I've personally tested out AutoCrit myself because I was curious about it. It gives some helpful insight. And if you're on a budget, it could be useful. Nothing is going to replace a human doing editing for you. But if that's the position you're in, I would rather have you use a tool like that than use nothing at all. Right? You should also read your own books. This is the case. In fact, this is advice that was first given to me by my literary editor. So this is not a self-editing versus, not self-editing thing here. Everybody should be doing this, whether you read them out loud yourself or you listen to them play back to you with text to speech. That's one option I prefer, right? It's invaluable. You need to hear those words out loud and make sure they sound right. Again, this is for whether or not you're self-editing. I think that this is something that everybody should do, is you should read out loud, and out loud is best, or use a text-to-speech tool, which I find that to be just as good, the text-to-speech as reading for myself personally, but you might want to give both of them a try. Beta readers, again, should be part of this process. They are your target audience, and so getting their input is great. They can also help point out some typos and offer some critique here and there, which can be helpful, especially if you're obviously if you're going the self-editing route. But even if you are hiring out, you probably want to give your editor a fairly clean manuscript to begin with. So you may even do some self-editing, even if you are going to have someone go in and do a copy edit or a line edit on your work. Right? You will still probably want to give them the cleanest manuscript that you can. But beta readers, I digress. Beta readers are going to give you something else in addition to that, which is their input on how they feel about the story. So your copy editor, in most cases, is just going to tell you, yep, here are the typos, you can fix these, and they're not going to be too concerned about the story. Your developmental or literary editor is going to be coming at, they're probably going to give you some feedback that's like this, like your beta readers, but your beta readers should be invested. And they should be, ideally, they're going to be fans, and they're going to give you input on how they feel about your writing, about what you've done with the characters, where the plot is going. They're going to give you that kind of feedback. which I think is essential. I will give an example here from another form of media. For those of you who are familiar with the Walking Dead TV series, it is a series. I don't know how many seasons there are now, but at one point they decided, and I understand Walking Dead, it's about zombies, it's a post-apocalyptic thing. Not everybody's cup of tea, don't worry. But the creators or the writers decided at one point to kill off one character, a very beloved character. That would be Glenn. If we can get a tribute to Glenn in the Zoom chat, I'd appreciate it from anybody who's willing to offer it. But they killed off his character. And after that, the show's ratings and the number of people watching the show nosedived. And the show was greatly affected by that. Now, what does that mean for you as an author, right? What does that mean for you? You're going to make decisions that your readers might not like. They might have very strong reactions to, especially if you're writing fiction. I guess this is especially for fiction authors. And it might be good to have a heads up on how they feel about some of those things. So beta readers can give you that because they're really invested. Your literary editor or developmental editor might look at it and go, you know what, this is the way you've done this, the way you've executed this is great. It's masterful. And then you put the book in the hands of your readers and they're like, you killed my favorite character. I'm done. I can't go on. You want to be careful with those sorts of things. So that's why beta readers are important, is to know that before you make one of those mistakes, to know how they're going to feel about it and how they're going to react to it. So let's talk about publishing, right? Because it really is that easy. Ready, set, go, right? Okay, maybe not. Your book is going to be judged by its cover, no matter what they told you, right? Your book will be judged by its cover, by readers. They will look at the cover. It'll be one of the first things they see, and it's going to be a pretty quick yes or no in most cases. They're going to see your book cover and they'll be like, oh, yeah, that looks like it's for me. Or, oh, no, that's definitely not for me. Or even worse still is, what is that book about? That's the worst one. Your cover needs to signal genre very strongly. And so it's like a filter. Right? I myself am not a romance reader. Believe it or not, I don't read romance. I read science fiction, fantasy, occasionally some horror, right? And so if I look at a book and I see no anything that indicates romance, I'm like, okay, no, I'm good. I'm gonna go find something else. If I see those indicators of the genres I like, that's great. That tells me this is a book I might be interested in. And if I see something that's confusing or weird or out of place or just unclear or vague what it's indicating, that's the death sentence. That means I'm not going to pay attention to it at all. Because at the very least, in theory, even if a reader isn't your target audience, but they recognize your book cover, they recognize your name, right? They may have a friend who's into that genre or a spouse that reads that genre, and you'll be recognizable in that way to them, and maybe they suggest the book or buy it as a gift, right? Probably not the most likely thing to ever happen, but if your book cover is just so vague and unclear as to what genre it is, nobody's going to even do that, right? This goes a long way to making your book marketable later on. I've changed book covers in books I published because they, after publishing them and releasing them, turns out that cover wasn't the best choice. More oftentimes than not, I have an artist who makes my covers for me. More often than not, the covers that do the best are the ones where I give the least amount of input and I let my artist kind of let his imagination run wild. And when I have the most input is usually when the covers are a little weaker, not because the art quality is poor, but because I'm thinking of it from an author's perspective and not a reader. Right? My artist happens to be really good at doing that. And my cover artist does. So I'm not trying to brag here, but you'll find a cover artist. Hopefully you can do the same thing for you. Wide versus KU. This is another discussion that comes up here when we're talking about self-publishing. This is going to be the biggest decision of your life, right? Right? To throw in a joke there. But to be realistic, if you are newly published, KU has massive benefits for you. If you're around self-publishing, I know it's kind of, I don't want to say hip or what have you, but there's a lot of advice out there for authors to go wide. But the reality, I think, is that if you are new to self-publishing, KU is probably one of the best opportunities you have to find an audience and to build one. If you have a backlist and an established audience, then yeah, you should consider going wide, especially if you've got your advertising chops, right? And you're ready to go in that department. Then yeah, I think you could make a go at going wide, but I don't think it's for everybody. KU is probably a good place for a lot of authors to start. That's Kindle Unlimited, because I hate to break it to you, but if you're a new author, if you're new to publishing, and you've just released your first book, your biggest fans might be your mom, your dad, your spouse, or your partner, your dog, right? They're going to care. But why should anybody else care that you published a book? What Kindle Unlimited does is it makes it very easy for readers to pick up a book from an author that they've never read before and give them a try. It really makes that process for the reader easier. And so for that reason, you'll have an easier time finding readers this way with KU. It's not the only way. It's not that you have to do that. If you have objections to it, you can go wide from the beginning. Totally doable. Totally doable. But it is going to be a little bit more of an uphill battle at first when you're just getting started, when you're getting established. Blurbs and descriptions are obviously a part of publishing as well, and you really do need to get good at writing them. Right? It's something that you should practice. You want to go in and rewrite them, write them over again, have multiple variations and versions of them. Go in and tweak them every now and then. Maybe this isn't something that you do weekly, or all the time, but it's something that you should do regularly. Go in and tweak them, test them out with readers. You can do this on your BookFunnel landing pages to some effect as well, by using different descriptions on different pages, or even just ask your newsletter subscribers, hey, which description do you prefer? Which one do you like better? Get their input. They're an invaluable resource for you. And then also compare with other authors, particularly in your genre. Look up other books in your genre, see what their blurbs are like, what their descriptions are like, and maybe even copy some of like the skeleton of their blurb. I think that's a good place to start, right? Look at the skeleton. In other words, do they have like a tagline and then a short paragraph about a character, and then another tagline and then a short paragraph about a different character? That's a structure, that's a scaffolding that you can start with, and then you just copy the scaffolding without copying the actual description, right? Copy the style and try it out and see if it works. And maybe it does, and maybe you tweak it, or maybe it doesn't work and you try something else, right? So that's some of my suggestions for you there. Pricing your books, the price you should charge. This is my opinion here. The price you should charge should be relative to the size of your existing readership. If you are new to publishing, you need readers more than you need profits right now. Right? You need readers. And again, we kind of come back to the what I talked about earlier with wide versus KU. Not everybody is going to care. I care, right? I do. But new readers who are going to see your book, why should they care? Why should they buy your book? If you have one book published and you price it at $4.99, right? How are you addressing, how attractive does that look, I guess, is the real question, to potential readers. Now, are you writing in nonfiction? You might be able to get away with that and be just fine. Right? Right? You might even be able to have a higher price than that. But if you're writing fiction, especially genre fiction, you're going to have an uphill battle. And so this is why my recommendations for publishing, for a pricing strategy, if you've written book one and book one is all you have, you don't even have a reader magnet, I would give away book one for free. And once you have a reader magnet, give the reader magnet away for free and then make book two 99 cents. And yes, you're going to get very little in terms of revenue from that. Right? Your royalties are gonna be very low at that price point. I totally understand that. But at this point, you need more readers. You need to attract readers. And if you only have one book published and maybe you're planning to write a series, right? Then you're going to have a harder time at a higher price point. So be realistic about that. When you are making money and paying bills, then you can make different decisions, right? I would avoid trying to copy the pricing strategies of other successful authors in your genre right out of the gate. Right? Start out cheap. You get people in the door. And once you've got an established readership, your mailing list has grown. You're figuring out your ads and getting them to click. Right? Then you can start to increase your prices as you go along and find a happy medium. But don't increase your prices too early on, right? Especially if these are individual books as well, right? There's a lot of different. We could do an entire webinar on pricing, folks. We gotta keep this moving. But suffice to say, if you're new to publishing, I recommend making your books as cheap as you can. You have some wiggle room in there. Make them as cheap as you can because you need readers more than you need dollars at that stage, right? Hopefully you're not trying to live off of your writing at that stage of things. That's a totally different ball of wax there. Social proof matters. We're on to that now. Readers will read reviews. They will purchase based on star ratings. So getting those reviews matters. It does matter. It's not something that you should ignore. You might think, I'm just going to put the book out there and then the reviews will come in. And yes, they will. They absolutely will over time. But how many sales are you going to get? Are you actively advertising and marketing? How do you know that those reviews are going to come in? Generally speaking, an ARC team is going to be your best bet to get a number of reviews. Also, how do you know that those reviews are all going to be positive as well? Since readers will purchase a book based on its star rating, you want to find your target audience. If a reader gives your book a poor review, it's probably because they're not your target audience. Unless, of course, there was some other issue with the book. There was something the matter with it. And you should take that feedback and you should apply it, right? And improve as an author in that respect, right? But you do want to build an ARC team for a few reasons here. Of course, you want to have reviews. It's great to have reviews lined up on release day so they're ready to go or shortly after a book's release to help it sell. This is great, especially if you're starting something new. If you're releasing books in a series, it is not as essential, but it is still a great thing to do to get some reviews in there. These readers should be predisposed to your writing and receiving it positively. And so they're going to seed that book with some good positive reviews so that when the inevitable one-star review comes along, because one-star reviews, guys, they're not always helpful. They're not always helpful, right? When that inevitable one-star review comes along, it's not going to affect your book's star rating as severely because that reader bought it or got it and it just wasn't their cup of tea and they were angry that day for whatever reason. because they spilled their coffee on themselves right before they got to work and were embarrassed, and they finished reading your book and they were mad about it and they left you a really bad review, right? So an ARC team is essential. Your newsletter subscribers are your best resource for this. Put out a call to action and see who signs up. We have entire webinars devoted to the topic of building an ARC team, which you can also go and watch. Remember, though, it is a numbers game. So if you're newly published, getting reviews from your existing readers is more valuable than you having them purchase your book. So if I were a new author and I just published book one and I have 500 readers on my mailing list, I'm probably just gonna, well, okay, maybe it's book two, because how did I get them on my mailing list, right? Fair enough. Maybe I'm publishing book two and I have 500 readers on my mailing list. I would not be above just giving all 500 of those readers book two and be like, here it is. I hope you like it. If you do, please leave a review. Because imagine if you get 10% of them to leave a review. That might be a little optimistic, right? Because not all of them are going to necessarily open it, right? But 10% of those who actually download it and read it. So maybe you get 20 or so reviews on your book. Imagine how impactful that will be to potential readers going forward. That will be huge. So if you're new to the self-publishing game, remember, right? There's certain things you need more than you need sales. So don't be thinking, oh, well, I don't want to just give my subscribers book two because I want some of them to buy it, or I want them to buy it. Sure, I understand that. But if you're early on in publishing, you need those reviews more than you need those dollars, right? Don't forget that you can also use social proof in other ways. So it's very useful for you in marketing, right? If you have some really good reviews, some, all authors these days you'll get all sorts of reviews. You'll get reviews that are really short, like, I liked it. It was good, 5 stars. You're going to get reviews that look like nowadays you'll get ones that look like they just generated it with AI. Like, I've got to review this book for this author, then I'll plug the book description into ChatGPT and ask it to write a 5-star review for me, because they don't want to take the time to write a review. Maybe they even read the book, but they just didn't want to take the time to write a review. Those aren't necessarily illegitimate reviews, by the way, but you can really tell they really stand out, and they're kind of painfully obvious. But right there's a lot of things you can do with them. I have one review that a reader left me. I write science fiction, and in her review, she said it was like Star Trek on steroids. I use that in marketing wherever I possibly can, because because it's a great tagline, especially when I can put it in quotes and say it was from a reviewer on Amazon, right? And also keep in mind that there's social media, right? There's social proof on social media, which can even go beyond book reviews. One thing I've seen a lot of, and I'm kind of curious to dabble with myself, is to have your readers comment on your Facebook ads with a glowing review in the comments. This is something you can actually do. They can go to that ad. There's a number of ways that they can do this and respond to it. Most ads essentially show up on Facebook as a post, and so they can be replied to with comments. And so you can, if you ever see ads on Facebook when you're scrolling through, if you happen to be on Facebook and you look in the comments, you might see some people saying, avoid this or what have you. Sometimes there'll be negative comments, which you can filter out if you need to, but you might see some positive comments there from people who have used the product, or in this case, we're talking about your readers. So there's other ways that you can use social proof even beyond just getting reviews for your book. Right now, everybody's favorite. This is the one that I think a lot of authors engage with really well, which is marketing your book. Again, because of the immediate results, and it's relatively pain-free. Relatively, I'll say. So you want to build an audience. This should be your first goal. Remember, nobody cares that you wrote a book. So you have to find people who will care. Right? You have to build that audience who cares. You have to go out and find them. That takes time. Right? That takes time. That takes effort. You're going to build your newsletter in any number of ways, and a portion of those readers who join your mailing list, maybe for your reader magnet, might read it and that's it. And maybe they started and they never finish it, or for any number of reasons, they just don't move on. They move on and they don't become a fan, right? They don't, at the end of the day, they don't care, right? Okay, you wrote a book, that's cool. I'm not really interested, even though they joined your mailing list. But your newsletter, this is the first step in marketing your book. It really is a part of marketing. Your newsletter is marketing for your book. That's the way I want you to see it. You're going to build your list before you do anything else. And I guess I should say, like, you don't have to like have 10,000 subscribers on your mailing list before you run a single Facebook ad. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that it should be your first priority. It should be the first thing that you do, especially if you're new to publishing. It is going to be relatively cheap, in many cases free, to at least start a mailing list, right? And then you're gonna, like, obviously BookFunnel can be a big help for you here to help start building your mailing list. And that's why I mentioned BookFunnel promos and swaps. This is a great budget-friendly way for you to build your list and boost sales. Of course, newsletter promos, newsletter swaps will help you build your list. You can build your list in certain genres. You can go from 0 to a relatively modest list in a pretty short amount of time. And when I say modest, that's maybe under 1,000 subscribers, but under 1,000 subscribers, even if you're sitting at 500, is still a great start to an audience for any self-published author, right? So don't worry about the size of your mailing list so much, right? There are authors out there who have huge lists, but they're bloated and full of readers that don't open emails and don't click on anything. And you want to find those engaged readers who really want to be on your list, right? At some point, self-publishing is pay to play, though, and you will have to spend ad dollars to get sales. Facebook and Amazon ads are obviously going to be the most notable here. Most authors who have a lot of success will use these for a variety of reasons. Obviously, Amazon ads are specific to the Amazon platform. If you're not on Amazon, not as useful. But nevertheless, at some point, ad spend is probably going to need to be a part of your strategy, right? Unless you get, you have some sort of fame factor, or you're a notable person that people are aware of, right? For the most part, you're going to have to spend some money on ad dollars. And even then, right, even when someone famous writes a memoir or an autobiography, they still spend ad dollars on it. So that means you probably will too. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box, though. Look at other places to advertise your books outside of Facebook and Amazon. There are other social media platforms you might look at. And there's also platforms like Reddit. I know Reddit is another one that is fairly, that some authors have had great success with. That's something I'm personally looking into myself. So don't be afraid to look at other options for advertising out there. However, this is probably not going to look like traditional advertising. Probably not going to do radio ads. Probably not going to do newspaper ads. The only time where that might be applicable is if you're in nonfiction. But for the most part, you're not going to see a lot of return from that. Right. And even if you're in nonfiction, I would only go the traditional advertising route if you're clicking on all cylinders and you can kind of just afford to do that as kind of like a fun thing on the side, right? I wouldn't take those traditional advertising methods seriously for this kind of business. And you also have the option of trying to go viral. If you've got a knack for social media, you go ahead and give it a try. What I recommend to authors, if you're going to be on a social media platform, there's some ones that are fairly, I don't want to say that they're compulsory or anything like that. But having a Facebook page, probably a good idea, at the very least. Facebook generally has a somewhat older, an audience that skews a little bit older. And most authors will tend to find that their readers will skew a little bit older as well. Folks, of a mature age have more time to read, so they're more active readers. But that's not always the case. There are younger readers out there, and oftentimes they're found through different ways. And so if you have a younger readership or a younger target audience, you may be looking at platforms other than Facebook. Maybe you would want to have a TikTok or something like that, this, that, or the other, or an Instagram. But here's the advice that I think really that matters the most is don't create a social media platform if you don't use that platform yourself. Right? So if you don't personally use Facebook, Facebook might be the only one where I think like, it's pretty easy to just create a page and not worry about it. But if you don't use, X, formerly known as Twitter, or you don't use TikTok, or you don't use Instagram, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Maybe you spend a lot of time on YouTube, and maybe that's your social media platform that you're familiar with, and you're familiar with that platform as a consumer of content there. That's actually going to make you a better creator of content on that platform. And so for that reason, I suggest that if you're going to start using social media, start with a platform that you're familiar with as a user. If you want to become familiar with one of those platforms, you want to know how to market your books on TikTok, for example, sign up for a TikTok account and start consuming content on TikTok to get familiar with it and see what it's like and become a TikTok user first, or Instagram or X or whatever it is that you're looking at doing, right? You might be surprised at some of the results. There's some very simple things that you can do. I know I myself, I need to pour some effort back into my YouTube channel, but you can get some decent views on YouTube, I know, from YouTube Shorts. And if you have a knack for it and it's something that you can incorporate and stick with, keep in mind this is another task for you to perform. So it also has to be something that you enjoy and you're interested in, and you can work it into your schedule, right? So don't be careful not to pour too much time into it. You can really easily go down a rabbit hole and get sucked in and spend a lot of time making content for social media and neglecting the other tasks we talked about, right? If you're spending 90% of your time on TikTok as opposed to writing, that might not work out very well for you in the grand scheme of things. So just bear that in mind. Also, good to know that everything I've listed here, of course, is not exhaustive. There's tons of other things that you can do to market your book, that you need to know to publish your book. This is really just meant to be a primer for a lot of these things. And so keep in mind, there's things even beyond this. Now here, I do have some resources for folks, for you all. This also not an exhaustive list. So I want to preface before I have this appear on the screen here. I've just listed a few things in each of these categories that I think would be helpful, whether it is a book that has been written on the topic, or it is there's some of these that are apps or applications that you can use for different things, or even coaching services in certain cases. There's a number of other things that I can only fit so much on the page. So not everything is here. And there's definitely some other things that you can find out there. These are just some of the first ones that come to mind. And maybe this just gets you started on your search for some of these tools. So for outlining, there's several apps listed here and websites. So Plotter, Plot Factory, the Novel Factory is another one. A book that comes up for writing, I know for myself was helpful, is 5,000 Words Per Hour by Chris Fox. There's a number of other books in this kind of genre about being a productive author in terms of writing and being productive in that regard. For self-editing, there is the Self-Editing for Self-Publishers by Richard Bradburn. That one has some good reviews on it, but there's also those tools I mentioned earlier, like Grammarly, AutoCrit, which didn't get auto-corrected here, thankfully. You can see that. For a writing aid, those are some that a lot of other authors use if you're looking at those. For blurbs, I recommend Help, My Blurbs and Ad Copy Suck by Mal and Jill Cooper. That is a good place to start. Again, plenty of other books out there. In fact, if you know of some other resources for any of these, go ahead and drop those in the Zoom chat, mention them, and we can also mention those in a minute here in the Q&A. For budget covers, Fiverr is a great place to look to start with. You can find some decent stuff on Fiverr. A couple others that are out there: Yummy Book Covers and 99 Designs. I think some of these might be more tailored towards romance, but you start doing a search, a Google search for some of these, and you can find a lot of sites like these where there are pre-made designs that you can purchase at a set price, or you can find an artist who can whip up a cover for you on the cheap. For newsletter building, we're talking about marketing here. Excuse me. We recommend Newsletter Ninja by Tammy Labrecque. If you don't have a copy of that, you should. And then for Facebook ads, I do recommend the Writing Wives author coaching. That's Mal and Jill Cooper again. They've got some great resources, including some free tools for you to measure the effectiveness of your ads. And then they have a whole coaching program. And they're by no means the only ones out there. Another name that, and it's escaping me at this moment. But Ammo is the name of the program. And what's his name? Somebody's going to tell me in the Zoom chat. But Ammo is AMMO is another program, a coaching program. I don't want to say the wrong. I have a name that's on the tip of my tongue. And I should know this. But I don't want to say it without looking at the chat because I'm definitely Steve Piper. Thank you. I was almost going to say Scott Piper. But yeah, Steve. There's a whole bunch of others. This is not an exhaustive list, folks. If I added way too much to this, if I add a lot more, the text would be too small and you couldn't read it. So that's why there's not everything in the world on this list, but these are just some. I wanted to have at least a few resources for you to provide for you to kind of get you pointed in the right direction. There's obviously a lot more out there. It's by no means exhaustive. So Q&A time. Let's see here. Emma, I've got you. Kelly, I'm gonna have to hunt for you here because I didn't get you pinned to the top right away. There we go. All right, ladies. I know the chat was popping. Probably a lot of people disagreeing with my perspective on a lot of stuff, right? No, I don't know.
Just that marketing's easy.
Oh yeah, Mark.
Or pain free.
Oh yeah. I was being tongue in cheek there a little bit. I do think that maybe marketing, like I said before, it's maybe easier to stay motivated when it comes to marketing because there's like relatively immediate consequences for what you're doing. Like your book joins a promo and you're going to get subscribers from that and you're going to notice that and you're going to see the results from it. Whereas, you use a different outlining method. How do you know how effective that is? Later on down the line. So that's why I said that. But yeah, what do folks want to know here? We went through a lot, and we're covering a lot of topics here. I realized, but let's see what we can do here.
Okay. Well, we'll start with Laura. She asked, how bad is it to remove and revise your book one in a series if you haven't yet published book two? Like a substantial rewrite of about 10 pages out of 300. Only three reviews so far. Pros and cons?
Yeah, I think if you're, well, for one, a couple things to consider. I'm assuming if you're on Amazon, if you have a print version of that book, the print version remains permanently because it has, because there's the possibility that somebody could resell that book on Amazon. And so that will remain there permanently. So if you've released a print version, you want to consider that.
Well, you can change out the files though, right? You can change out a
yes,
file
you
to
can
print.
change the files. Yes. So if you're asking like pulling it completely and then republishing it as a completely new book, generally I would advise against that for the most part. Especially if you have a print version, but even if you don't, probably easier just to tweak it as long as as long as you haven't done anything too crazy. Like, again, 10 pages out of 300, that shouldn't be a big deal, I would say. So yeah, by all means, I have done this myself too. The George Lucas, right? Um, First of all, don't everybody takes the George Lucas thing the wrong way. For those of you who are not familiar, George Lucas is obviously the creator of Star Wars. This is an accessible example because most everybody knows what Star Wars is, but um, so at least you're familiar enough. Uh, but George Lucas is also known for going back and making changes to his work after the fact and getting criticized for it because he changed some things like whether or not Han Solo shot first in the cantina scene with Greedo or that sort of thing, and tweaking things and changing things after the fact. The reason why he gets so much flack for that is because Star Wars was already really popular, right? So Star Wars was already huge, and he came back a long time later to make changes. Look, if you don't have a huge established readership and you realize maybe there was a plot hole in one of your books, or you want to retcon something and you want to go back and change it, as long as, heck, even if you wanted to rewrite a book, you do you. I think if you don't have a huge readership, I wouldn't be too worried about going back and making changes like that, especially if you need things to kind of align differently to move your series forward. So I wouldn't feel guilty about it. Just understand it's going to take you some time. I've done some remastering on some of my writing before, as well. So I can tell you it's worth it. You feel good afterwards, gives you some peace of mind. Just know that you're going to be committing some time to that if you do it.
Right. Yeah, I've actually removed just a single sentence from my book because I realized it was going to impact where I wanted the next story to go.
Yeah.
And it was like, if I keep that in there and people are going to see that, they're going to know like
Yeah.
I didn't plan this.
Oh,
So I yeah, removed that.
yeah. No, I have made done entire chapter rewrites, and what the issue I ran into was is that my main character was not likable. He was not intended to be likable exactly. He's a flawed character, but he it was more like people were just I really just don't like this guy. And so I had to make a few little tweaks to kind of explain why he is the way he is, and that actually helped. The other thing that I did was I rewrote, not rewrote, I wrote a new reader magnet that serves as kind of a prequel and an introduction to his character. So the solution isn't always to fix the existing book. Sometimes it is to add something ahead of time to kind of change the tone and set the stage for what you're introducing later. But anyway, that's just
I've
something
done
else.
all of these, so I'm just listening to y'all curious. Books and completely republished them, rewritten. I've added whole chapters to existing books and just on the same ASIN. I've done all of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried.
In the long term, it doesn't really.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, like Kelly said, the only time I would really be concerned about it is if it will substantially change. Um, if that thing you excluded or edited substantially changes or affects something in future books.
Yeah.
But
That is tricky.
they'll still have the old book on their device, so a lot of this you can't even control. So
Right. Right. But if your book hasn't gotten out there to a whole lot of people
yeah,
yet,
don't worry about it.
if you're under 10,000 sales, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, I just pulled a backlist book. I was going over my figures and I realized it had made so little money since I published it. And this week I made the decision to just pull it down and reboot it. Fresh cover, fresh editing, tweak it a little bit because I'm like, no one's barely bought it anyway. So might as well. Okay, I think the next question is Maria. Okay, is there a formula for adding new book list to older books? I have two series and published each without knowing I was going to write the other. I need to go back and add some. I think she's talking about back matter.
Back matter, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I change that whenever I need
Yeah.
to. Yeah, I add in new covers. I actually put the cover of my books when I have a new cover to put in there. I'll go back and change the rest of the series to adjust for that so that your back matter is always updated.
Back matter can be tricky. My advice on back matter would be to keep it simple. And where you can, try to link to something else. So, for example, if you want to link, if you have a book in a series and you want to link them to all of the books in that series, you could put a link to for example, a BookFunnel bundle page, which you can very easily edit at any time. And so the back matter in your books is more kind of static and unchanging. And it's just really simple to have them go there. If there's something you need to change, that's an example of something you can do to kind of simplify it. This could work the same way if you have kind of two series and you maybe hadn't considered that you're writing one or the other. Of course, you can add a page, and sometimes it's even in the front matter, but other books by this author or something like that, you can list your titles there or list your series. But you could also use a link to an external page, which means instead of having to update your back matter for each book that you have published and uploaded, right? And instead of having to create new files, you just go and edit your BookFunnel bundle page, and all of the books point there anyway, and you just change it whenever you need to change it. Or it
Yeah.
could be a page on your website even, right?
I'll update with each new release, I'll update my 5 top selling titles individually with more detailed stuff, but the rest of it, yeah, just like Jack said, send them to a generic.
Yeah.
Well, and something to keep in mind if you're somebody that gets a lot of highlights on Amazon, where a reader will highlight and you'll have like 10 highlights or 50 highlights of a certain phrase or something that people liked in your book. If you re-upload a new version of your ebook, those get wiped out.
Yeah.
So it is a good idea to use what Jack was saying and have a changeable page that they still are going to, you're not having to update your back matter as often. Because I had that happen where I had a few lines that had been, and those are nice because it draws readers' attention, even if it's only one or two. If the reader can see it, it'll draw their attention to it, and then they'll highlight it, and it kind of gives that feedback of social feedback with each other. And if you wipe those out, that kind of sucks if you did have some of those. So that's something to keep in mind if you're publishing on Amazon and you get those.
Yes.
Any idea how many highlights how many readers have to highlight a certain passage before Amazon will post it?
I do.
I haven't seen it on the Amazon main page. I think it must have been like 10 or something, because when I went back into my Kindle to look at my own that I had, I didn't see them. But it was only a handful. And then I had to change out my back matter or something. I had to change something, and I lost those anyway.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It might be 50. I'm not sure if it's 50 or if it's less. I'm not really positive.
That might be fun to do with a new release, experiment with your readers. Like, can you all highlight?
Yeah.
Highlight a few favorite passages and see what happens.
And see what happens. Yeah, especially with like a novella where it's shorter and maybe less time for them to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that being useful. All right.
Okay, so Maria is also asking, what about copyrights? I have found it confusing.
It is confusing. If you're talking about including a copyright disclaimer within your books, it's relatively straightforward. You can hire somebody if a legal professional, if you want to be sure that you've got the exact right, perfect copyright disclaimer. And if you really do want to have I guess with the Library of Congress, you can do all that if you go the extra mile if you want to. It's one of those things where I think it's optional, not always necessary, and really, it's going to be quite. It comes down to this: if you're worried about copyright in the sense of somebody taking your work and copying it, or you know, pulling from it heavily and violating your copyright, do you have the money to sue them? That's the question. So it's very expensive. Copyright law is very annoying and pedantic. So I don't know how much time you'd want to spend on it. It's necessary in certain cases, but it's one of those things where if you're actually going to if you're actually going to pursue legal action against somebody for violating your copyright, most copyright protections are already in place by virtue of the fact that you wrote it. That is, by virtue of the fact that you produced it, and that you have evidence of that. You by default have the copyright. So there's no legal document that you need in order to have the copyright. By creating it, you by default naturally have the copyright. It's the question of, do you want to go defend that in court and spend the money? As somebody who has had to go to court for other reasons, not criminal, by the way, I should get out ahead of that. Civil court, divorce. I'll just put it that way. It's expensive and it's not fun. So you got to kind of weigh your options there. The other thing I'd say is I don't think, I don't know if I'd be worrying. I wouldn't be losing too much sleep over that. Personally, would be my recommendation, right? If you're a big name out there in your genre, maybe it really, what's the harm in going the extra step? I think that makes sense, but it's not something that I think is absolutely necessary and you need to worry about, especially if you're new to self-publishing.
So the only reason I did do the Library of Congress copyright, and the only reason that I did it was because I'd had friends who had had Amazon take down their work because
Sure.
somebody else made a claim, and they're like, okay, prove that you did it. And one of the easier ways to do that is with showing them your copyright documents.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I did it. I don't think it's gonna, if somebody ever wanted to plagiarize me or whatever,
Yeah.
I don't know that there would be enough reason to make it a thing.
Yeah.
But for that was the only reason I ended up doing it online.
Right. And most of the time, and who knows, this could change. I know AI could make this really interesting at some point in time. But most of the time, if somebody's gonna steal your book and misuse it, they're gonna pirate it. And they'll even give you credit for it. Most pirate sites out there will download the EPUB of your book and put it up there, and sure, that's a violation of your copyright because they're reproducing the book, but they're not even trying to really sell your book. They're trying to get people's personal data so that they can scam them. So in a lot of cases here, it's not something to necessarily lose a lot of sleep over. But yeah, it can be helpful in certain cases. Whether or not that's something you want to worry about, I kind of leave that up to you, honestly. All right.
All right. T. Atkins is asking, what do you do when your genre doesn't seem to be a favorite among beta readers? And I wasn't sure if they meant recruiting beta readers or if the beta readers you have aren't quite a fit for what you write.
Yeah. So for starters, if you're growing your list, I would make sure that you're growing your list right. So let's say you're using BookFunnel promos, make sure you're joining promos that are a really good fit for your genre. If you're a specific subgenre or niche within that, then yeah, you might you might have trouble recruiting if your audience is kind of more generic. Like I'm trying to think here. Maybe if you can drop your genre and subgenre in the comments too, that might help give some insight as well. But I could see that recruiting could be tricky. The thing is, at the end of the day, keep in mind it's a numbers game. I don't know how big your list is. The number of people you have interested in beta reading might not be huge. I would.
Commercial women's fiction.
Okay. Okay. I I would imagine that wouldn't be too tricky. I guess what I would suggest is there's a number of ways that you can do this. If you can have some sort of way to be constantly pulling in beta readers to some degree, I think that is helpful. So not just depending on how you recruit, right? So are you recruiting every now and then and putting out a call to action, or is there some sort of static recruitment in, like one example you could use. I've done this before, and it worked pretty effectively, was to just put out a beta lightly edited version of a reader magnet, in this case is what it was, and at the end give them the option to submit feedback through a form and ask them if they wanted to become a beta reader. And most of them who gave feedback wanted to become a beta reader. And in theory, you could even kind of leave that beta version of the book available, even if there's a more polished version of it somewhere else, because it's kind of the readers who are really going to be interested in, that sort of thing, depending on what you're looking for, right? But I'd maybe just include it at the end of your reader magnets, either way, whether it's polished or it is truly a beta copy, and have that static call to action there. Again, if you need beta readers, if that's what you need, I would go to any lengths to get them until you get them. So again, depending on how you've been trying to recruit them, try to recruit them more, not harder, but more, right? And leave that call to action up there. Again, reader magnets is a great place for this, even if, and I would ask them for feedback on that book. I would ask them for feedback on that book, even if that reader magnet has been out for a long time and it's been out for a while, right? You could even create something specifically as a beta reader magnet, right? That's intended for that purpose, and funnel people into that one. That's maybe an extra step right there. But that kind of call to action, I have had some success with. At the end of the day, it's still a numbers game. And so it's still going to be tricky. It's still going to be tricky to get that sort of feedback. But I guess that would be my next question is, how did you go about recruiting those beta readers? Did you just put a call to action out once in one newsletter? That might not be enough. You might have to have something out there for a while to attract enough people. Yeah, betareader.io on Reddit. Gotcha. Okay. That's not something I'm directly familiar with. So I would say go to your mailing list too, and go to those readers and try to get some of them as well, because some of them might offer you, it might be a little bit more of a mixed bag. You might get feedback from some readers that's, not all that helpful. But if they're on your mailing list, chances are they're more your target audience to begin with, right? If they got on your list from getting one of your reader magnets, they're at least interested in your genre, most likely. So, excuse me, that's where I would start. That would be the next thing to look at. So consider putting a call to action in one or not even necessarily like, hey, join my beta reader team, but like, hey, did you like this book? You can leave me feedback here, and send them to a form to leave you feedback. And in that form, they can opt in to join your beta reader team, right? And ask for feedback that's similar to what you're looking for from your beta readers. right? So that it's kind of along the same lines, and so you can kind of see what their feedback looks like. Because some of them you might want to include, some of them you might not, and then go from there. So that would be my first recommendation.
I don't like you sometimes because you give me more ideas to execute, and that just adds to my admin task. Because now my brain is, because you know how you can update. Okay, I won't say anything else.
You're saying you don't like me sometimes, or somebody else said that?
Yeah, I don't like you sometimes because you give me many ideas that add to my admin task, and I'm like, I don't need to go down another rabbit hole, but I am.
Oh, I know. Well, and hey, that's why I suggested something kind of passive where you can just put it at the end of the reader magnet and you can check it once a month. And so it doesn't have a whole lot of effort put into it, really. It's like trap fishing, right? It's going to consume a whole lot less of your time. Just put out a trap and catch some bluegills and some crawdads, right? Than spending, than waking up at 5 a.m. and spending half your day out there on the lake. And I don't know, unless you're into that sort of thing, but yeah. So
there are BookFunnel hosted promos specifically for ARCs, but if you join those to recruit for beta readers, I guarantee the promo organizer will not mind.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You're laughing.
What was that?
We're sure that the promo organizer is not going to
Oh,
mind.
yeah, because Emma or I would be the promo organizer. Yes. Well, the book, if they're explicitly BookFunnel hosted, then it's Emma. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Gaynor Jones is asking, where are other places other than KU to self-publish? I did answer this in the chat, but there's actually quite a few. If you're not in Kindle Unlimited, you can join up, which is like Apple, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Kobo is really big in Canada and Australia, and I think Great Britain. So you have different choices, and then you can also do it on your own website, of course. And Draft Digital is also, it's like a distributor, so they will put it out to libraries, and they can get it into some other kind of bookstores. Like there's like one that's particularly in Italy, so you just set it in one time in Draft Digital, and they have like a large amount of places you can self-publish. So
there was a question kind of along that's related here from Laura that I saw about direct sales. She said, I've heard people say don't do direct sales unless you have a backlist. And I've heard people say if you're going to have a website, you might as well sell direct from the get-go. So what are your thoughts? Two things. I think what I would say is don't expect direct sales to be a significant portion of your income until you either have, until you have a significant audience. I think audience is actually probably more impactful than your backlist. Audience, especially if you're actively publishing new material, backlist I don't think matters as much. Audience matters more. But yeah, if you have a website and you're wide, might as well include it in one of those options. So yeah, along with those self-publishing options, I would, if you're gonna go wide and you're not just gonna be in KU, then your website might as well be one of those options. Might as well be. Are you going to get a whole lot of sales if you're new to publishing and you don't have a very big audience? Probably not, and that's okay. But you have some more flexibility when selling direct, and you'll keep more of your money, right? Which is a big deal.
And speaking of publishing platforms, but also wanting feedback, stuff like Vella or maybe a very cheap Patreon or something like that. You can post chapters in progress if you don't mind. Some authors like me, I hate posting first and second draft chapters, but some authors don't. But like platforms like that, you can get some feedback as you go.
Yeah, that can be really good. All right.
Okay, and Laura is asking about what do you think about book sirens for reviews for a new author?
Yeah. I don't have personal direct experience with book sirens. Um, I think from what I understand, I think Book Sprout kind of along the same lines. There's probably some differences, I'm sure. I'm more familiar with Book Sprout myself. It can maybe be helpful in helping kind of manage a team of ARC readers in some respects, but I would not anticipate or I wouldn't be thinking that you're going to put your book there and it's going to get discovered. The discoverability is generally, um, from what I've seen and heard, uh, the discoverability isn't huge. It probably depends on your genre. Emma, you're in the chat basically saying what it's people are going to think that I'm just copying off of you. But yeah, no, I agree with Emma. It's genre dependent. I have found the most success with just asking my mailing list subscribers, hey, who I've got this book coming out. Who wants an art copy? Here you go. And keeping it pretty set. And then occasionally, putting out another call to action. And then I'll keep that list of folks and give them the next one. And I just, I do not micromanage my ARC team. In fact, I probably undermanage it, especially over the summer, probably a little undermanaged. Uh, but yeah, you, I don't think that those tools are 100% necessary. Uh, and your newsletter, and not to toot our own horn here, but your newsletter and BookFunnel are all you would really need, in my opinion. And the discoverability, I wouldn't count on the discoverability from those platforms all the time. Who knows? You might have better luck than some others, but and different genres, it'll probably vary a lot too. If you're in romance, probably a little bit more discoverable, but it just depends.
Okay. And Millie, last question. Millie is asking, are there any ideas for marketing to a target audience of older people who tend not to click on Facebook or Amazon ads?
Yes. Well, actually, we see a lot of authors. I'm not trying to shoot down your question here. But we see a lot of authors actually doing direct sales, which is why we see it come through our reader support, who are targeting older readers through Facebook ads. So number one, I wouldn't assume that they're not going to click on ads. I wouldn't assume that from the get-go. However, there's probably a portion of that readership who's probably less likely to click on ads and on social media, for example. And unfortunately, they might just be a little hard to reach. Those readers who aren't going to click on ads, they might be a little harder to reach through those methods. I don't know that traditional advertising methods would really be viable or useful. But what I will say is do not underestimate the number of readers in that older age bracket. Again, I'm assuming we're talking 55, 65 plus, perhaps. There's a lot of readers that we help in that age bracket from BookFunnel authors who are targeting them with Facebook ads. So if you haven't tried Facebook ads yet, my first suggestion to you would actually be to try a Facebook ad and target that age group specifically and see what results you get from it. And then if you have trouble with that, and then there's going to need to be some more creativity involved, perhaps. That's tricky. But I would say I wouldn't assume the user base on Facebook skews older as it is anyway. So I wouldn't rule that out as an option. As far as what other ways there are to, it might be finding some other authors who have the same audience as you and doing some cross promotion. So if there's an established author out there that has the same audience you do, do some sort of cross promotion with them. If you're able to arrange a swap with them, a newsletter swap of some kind, that could be a big deal. Or even heck, even if you pay them to be on their newsletter, right? If you're really desperate for opportunities to get in front of those readers, that might be a more reliable method. So that would be my advice there. Don't assume that they're not going to click on Facebook ads. I mean, based on our experience, we see a lot of that actually. And then cross promotion might be your best bet, because other advertising, if this type of reader, this hypothetical type of reader, isn't going to click on ads on social media, they're not going to click on ads on the internet to begin with, then your best inroad is to cross promote with somebody else that is already established in that genre with that same readership, that same target readership.
Yeah, I was gonna say we see so many, like there's some authors who are their genre skews pretty like much to the older scale, and they have no problems with, I think their main source of marketing is Facebook ads.
In fact, generally speaking, the click rates for that age group, 65 plus, they are more likely to click.
Yeah.
Is what the data from Facebook says too. So, so I wouldn't make any assumptions there. Give it a try if you haven't, and maybe tweak it if you have, and then look at cross promotion.
And also, because my futuristic is popping up here. Like I've been publishing for 8 years. Remember, this isn't going to be much of an issue in another 5 to 10 years, maybe another 5 to 15. But you can also start thinking about now, like I'm 42. Like, do you want to start advertising to my demographic too?
42?
Yeah, I'm 42, 43. So if your demographic is 55 plus and you're going to be publishing long term, you might want to start roping in some of the younger readers as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm teasing you, Emma. I'm right behind you. So
no, but like in 5, I think that's realistic. Like in 5 years, either the people who are going to learn, and then our generation will start aging into it anyway. So,
well, my parents are in their early to mid 60s, and they're on the internet. They're on Facebook. They're around. They're doing stuff. Whereas my grandparents, who are in their early 90s, I don't know that they're your target audience, but my grandmother, before she had some health issues, she's had some issues come up there, but she would read all the time, and so they find books one way or the other. I think she even did have a Kindle, so and then she was reading on it in her late 80s. Recent years, her health hasn't been the greatest, so that's obviously gotten in the way. But yeah, I wouldn't assume too much. So
my mom is 70 and she does just fine.
Mm-hmm. All right, then that was it.
Yeah, I don't.
Awesome. Well, thank you, folks, for joining us today for this session. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it helpful. Like I said, I want to do kind of a big picture webinar here and take a few steps back and just like look at the whole thing and lay out the whole map for people who are kind of new to self-publishing. I know for a lot of folks, a lot of these things, you probably have your bases covered and you're like, oh yeah, I already have my editor lineup. I always write every day. I have a perfect writing habit that I never break. And I absolutely love marketing my book, whatever it happens. But you might be, you might have some of these things down, but maybe there's some things here that you needed some input on. If you have further questions, of course, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team. We answer questions like this. So it's not just how do I use BookFunnel, but if you have questions, you need some advice, we can give some input. We not always gonna, if you're like, hey, is my book cover good? Do you think my book cover is good? That kind of like opinion we might not want to give you directly. Our Facebook group, our BookFunnel authors only Facebook group, is another good place for feedback, though. And so sometimes for things like that, like do you think my book cover looks good? Does, because, Jamie
It's
doesn't
always
always
good.
give negative feedback. And sometimes your book cover might, need a little touching up. And we like to stay positive where we can. But if you need advice on certain things, or you have questions about just how some aspect of self-publishing works, yeah, shoot us an email, support@bookfunnel.com, and our author support team will help you out.
All right.
Kelly, I
That's
think you
it.
were going to interject there for a second.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a good place to get that because I've seen authors in the Facebook group come in and be like, is my cover on genre?
Yeah.
And people in that genre will give feedback because like I wouldn't be able to help anybody with a sci-fi
Oh,
book or
yeah.
a fantasy book. So like if it's not your genre, but there might be somebody in the group that is your genre, or if you just want feedback, don't
Right.
no spamming, no.
Yes. Yes.
No self promo.
Yes.
But feedback's
And
always good.
then Kelly, if we're going to get this recording up to bookfunnel.com/videos, Kelly's the one who uploads them there. So everybody thank Kelly for that. So there will be a replay of this. You can come back and check it out. She's going to get it up probably later today, but at the latest, it'll be tomorrow morning when it'll be up.
Yeah. Usually it's by the end of the day.
Yep.
I'm on
Perfect.
the West Coast, so I have different
Yes.
times.
Yes. But thank you, folks, for joining us. Thank you again to Emma and Kelly. I sometimes forget to thank you too. I apologize, but thank you for being here today. And that's going to be it for today, folks. We're going to obviously have some new webinars coming up in August. I'm going to put a poll out in our author Facebook group because I want to get some ideas of what people are wanting to see in our webinars. Something I haven't done in a while. It's not that I'm out of ideas. I definitely have some ideas, but I want to know what you guys want to know about too. Kind of put my ear to the ground a little bit. So if you're not in the Facebook group, go join us. I think Emma did drop a link to that in the chat. Thank you, Emma, for doing that. Hopefully we'll see you all over there too. I'll probably post that here in just a few minutes, probably at the top of the hour. So go take a look at that there and chime in and let us know what you want to see. All right. That's going to be it for today, though, folks. Have a good one, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.